There are a lot of different parts of digital trust. There's so many different interactions, there's so many different transactions, but what we're trying to do is establish measures of trust. And this evolves over time. So we need a whole new ecosystem of this trust to take us out of this analog world and take us into the digital world. So think level of confidence between two parties in a digital relationship. Right? There's so many interactions and transactions, like we said. These could be simple communications, like a text message, or a full financial transaction, and everything in between.
Well, for me, it's all of the different elements. We know that so many of the transactions that we're doing today have to do with information sharing or trusting, even just deciding, even these days, how to order dinner. There's so many transactions and interactions we do that have to do with knowing what should I share, who can I trust, what can I trust, and how far can I trust them. So I think one of the things we've been looking at is how can we really better enunciate the factors that go into those kind of trust decisions, and how can we help to better measure and improve those things like we have for many of the security and privacy elements.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if you come from the perspective of the older folks, trust is a thing that evolves over time through a personal relationship, through knowing someone, through repeated success in transactions. You go to a shop, you buy something, you're happy with it. And nowadays, I suppose people from my generation or earlier are often a little insecure about what trust means in the digital world. Everything's anonymous. People are no longer visible. You cannot shake hands. You can't hand over cash. And I think part of the mission is to establish, as Greg said, measures of trust that people can easily understand, that people can easily use. So it's not like having a call center, e-banking, whatever. No, we need something more integrated, maybe a whole new ecosystem that will address issues of digital trust for the consumer, for the firms, for others who really live in it, and bring the old world, the analog world, into what is all digitalized and transformed, and then trust needs to move that same way.
To some extent, it's all about the culture. And I happen to stay many of my nights in hotel rooms, and just thinking about how does the staff treat my information? How do they protect my information? How do they make sure that the Wi-Fi that I use in their facility is going to be reliable? How do the businesses that I purchase from or use, how do they apply procedures and culture and behaviors that are going to help me make sure that I can trust what they're going to use with my data, to at least the extent that they've made promises. To what extent will they keep those promises through their procedures and the way that they do business?
I agree a lot with what Greg said here, talking about culture, talking about how does the staff treat my information. I check into a hotel. Do I trust those interactions? Do I trust the Wi-Fi and those types of things? And so this ecosystem that we're talking about has a lot of elements. Really, at the core, you've got people, process, technology, and organizations, and that's what we call nodes in a framework. But they're all interconnected, and a change to one of these can affect the others. And that's where a model such as this really is important, and it has to have dynamics built into it, such as domains that can connect these areas and provide a conduit for changes. And they can include things like culture, human factors, architecture, governance, right? There are several other things there, because in the digital world, things are not static. They change on a regular basis. And we need to have a way to manage those dynamic interactions between all of those areas.
Trust is an interesting concept. It's really easy to lose and really hard to gain. And I think digital trust really comes from very clearly expressing expectations out of systems, and then measuring and managing to those expectations. How are we ensuring that we're delivering the right results? How do we ensure that we're protecting privacy and security? Being very clear and honest when you fail to do those kinds of things is also a part of digital trust. And then I think the final part of it is submitting these systems to evaluation by independent third parties that give you the opportunity to prove your trust.
Okay, so what does digital trust mean to me? So in fact, another arm of our organization is focused on the construct of verifiable digital credentials. And incidentally, there's an organization called W3C under the leadership of Sir Tim Berners-Lee. As you may know, Sir Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet. And this is the whole process of how can we manage, first of all, that we share data with, with other organizations who may wish to data only as much as that we want, and at any point we can retract that. And on the other hand, how can I be sure that the data I'm receiving from someone is valid, that it hasn't been tampered with, that there's been nothing done to that data, and that it is an accurate representation of the data as it was produced at source. So the whole construct of verifiable digital credentials enhances digital trust, in that I don't have third parties, having, first of all, even having access to the data or being able to change data or do anything to data, simply because that's the nature of these verifiable digital credentials is, you've got to be able to have this trust. And that trust construct, in fact, you could argue started, when would it be now, 11 odd years ago, with a good old paper by shall we call it mythical Satoshi Nakamoto. You might recognize that name from Bitcoin. But what was really brought to light in that paper was the whole issue of the power of blockchain technology to be tamper-proof, and a whole diversity of other characteristics within it. But certainly digital trust, I can't say us as humans are the greatest at it. There's always a temptation, how can I exploit this? What else can I do with this? And history in many countries is rich with data being exploited without permission of the communities or the people it belongs to. And this whole digital trust landscape, particularly under W3C or verifiable digital credentials, is a critical component downstream, certainly, and that momentum is building to helping to ensure digital trust.
Digital trust, in my mind, is really gaining the trust, an organization or an entity gaining the trust of their users, meaning their customers, their partners, and their vendors. And an organization takes steps to ensure that they are protecting the information and the privacy of those particular users, and are transparent, if you will, to the community, and also allowing peer reviews and independent objective reviews of those techniques, those processes that they use in order to protect their digital assets and the information assets of their users.
Digital trust is an interesting topic. It's been emerging quite a bit in the last few years. I see more and more that we're talking about the right things, which is how do we start to trust software? How do we start to understand how to, have more transparency in software so that people can know that they can rely on it without having complications from adversaries and hackers. And I also think it's about privacy, making sure that our private data is being protected and that we can trust what we're bestowing on people. So for me, it's a question of authorization and making sure that the folks that I'm entrusting with what is some of the most sensitive information is truly happening on my behalf.
Yeah, I think digital trust is so important today, especially in the world that we operate in, where everything is currently largely remote, but we're all still connected, and we need to make sure that we have that trust in our data and our systems as we're all operating in this way. So across the confidentiality, integrity, the availability of our information, across our people, process, technology, really all of these things are so important in making sure that we have that trust and that we can operate our businesses and know that we're going to be achieving our goals there.
Digital trust, being able to understand the data that we have, know where it is, and be able to use that data. So it's a broad umbrella of a term. We just talked about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Of course, making sure that we understand that data and be able to protect it. But if I'm going to be able to trust the data, I need to be able to use it, right, and have it in a mechanism and a manner in which is translatable right throughout the business, right? Being able to take whether it's the financial data to put it into action so that I understand how is it going to affect my pricing as I go into marketing, and being able to use that information across the business as a whole. So I think that is both on the security side of it, right? How do we protect? How do we know? Then how do we trust that data? And as well as how do we make sure that data is effective and we can use it when we need it?
Digital trust is about educating users or employees about protecting the confidentiality and integrity of data in our digital world.
Building digital trust is to win the heart share of our customers and also our stakeholders. So it is actually to make people life much easier, that they feel safe and secure when they're using our banking products. So they don't have to understand how that is being secured, but then they just have to feel safe, and they add values to the brand that is being trustworthy and is more loved. So it's not just about making money or just telling people how secure things are, but then it's just an overall sense, and it's how we define it as winning the customer's heart share when it comes to building digital trust.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, digital trust means that I'm able to trust what's going on within my infrastructure and within my relationships in the digital space. However, I think that zero trust can be applied in the context of enabling digital trust by getting rid of all the things that are potentially threatening to the trust relationships that we should have.
To me, digital trust is, as a user, has the confidence that anything that a company or anything digital, they are confident that it is private and that it's not going to be released, or anything that they say is not going to be released, and that their data ethics, while they're online, is secure and it's private to what they want. And unless it's released, then, or unless they give permission to be released, that it stays private.
I would think digital trust primarily, if most people hear that, they're going to think that their information is protected. So that's, either a business type information that they're handing off to an organization, or their more personal information, which again could be business related, like credit card info or social security numbers, or maybe more sensitive private information if it's a site that's asking about other personal aspects like their health data or their opinions about things, political opinions, other things related to their behavior or their personal preferences.
To me, right off the bat, when I think of digital trust, I think about in new strategy that's been out there a bit recently, zero trust. And this is a deviation from trust but verify to, there's zero trust and verify everything. So ensuring that there are capabilities that are baked into an organization's cybersecurity program to verify users, devices, capabilities continuously all the time. And to me, digital trust, when you think of digital trust, is to ensure that this is not something static, but it is something that's dynamic, it's automatic, and that all access by users to data is continuously reviewed. And that is the world I think that we're moving towards in terms of a digital trust world, is that we have those automatic capabilities that are baked in. Not easy, but to me, that's what it's all about. So it used to be trust but verify, but we can't trust anymore. We got to make sure that we are verifying in a continuous manner users, devices, and access to assets.
Digital trust to me requires me to feel completely safe and secure in whatever it is that I'm doing online. So if I'm providing my data to somebody, or whether I'm logging in through a system, I want to know that actually the login and my data is going to be safe, and the company is going to respect my data and such like. And I'm going to use an example here. We've recently seen the IRS turn around and say they're going to use, or were going to use, facial recognition, which of course a lot of people distrust. Now I understand that they need to fix tax fraud, and they clearly got this very, very wrong. But if we look at digital trust, the authentication partner that they decided to use, if, like me, you delve into the privacy policy of that partner, one of the things is if you've used Facebook Connect to create the authentication mechanism into some of the government services they partner with, so for example, the DMV here in California, one of the things in their privacy policy it states is that about what they do with your friends list. And it's something like that where a company maybe isn't doing something, but it also doesn't create the trust required for me to feel good about using it. So it's not always about just the actions, it's also about what they've written down, what's in their privacy policies, what's in the permissions of their apps, etc. And I think those are really, really important things to keep and gain consumer trust, which also then goes into business reputation and such like as well. So super important topic.
Digital trust to me is having data that is reliable and passes the litmus test for the key components of information that you need to use. So it's timely, it's accurate, somebody's reviewed it and approved it. All the components that make it reliable so that you know that the conclusions you're drawing are accurate.
Digital trust essentially means that people have confidence that the computer systems that they're interacting with have their best interests at heart. This has always been problematic with spam, but it's going to get a lot worse with the metaverse. We now have indications that the VR glasses will have sensors in them so they can pick up microexpressions. And we know from studies in psychology and physiology that an image will that we see for less than the amount of time it takes to rise to the level of consciousness will actually generate a response of microexpression. That is, I can be looking at and playing a game, and there can be these very small subliminal pictures that occur while I'm playing the game that I don't even consciously see. And my reaction to them will be recorded and then sold to advertisers. You can build a fairly comprehensive portfolio of an individual's psychological profile using this kind of technique. And that scares me. And if that sounds entirely fanciful, remember the news we just heard about the suicide helpline, where they're taking the information, anonymizing it, and sharing it with a for-profit company to try to come up with solutions they can sell? There don't seem to be any boundaries or limits. So digital trust is an utopian dream of what the world would be really like. And this coming from a long-term fan of Star Trek.
It reminds me of one of the articles that again I wrote for ISACA, which was about how chief information security officers can elicit the support from the senior management. And this is where I mentioned that trust is the cornerstone of any relationship, whether personal or private, whether personal or professional. I mean, the reason why individuals choose product A over B is primarily the trust. And when we speak about the digital trust, we are speaking about the fact that our identity, our data, the services that are being delivered to us, or the services that we as the service providers are delivering to our customers would be delivered, I mean, in a fair manner. And again, you can peel off the layers of the fairness in terms of, and you can redefine them in terms of cybersecurity and privacy as well. But again, the idea is that, when we speak about the digital trust, it's about how we deliver the services to our customers in a fair manner, in which there is no deception, and where people are told what they will be delivered, against what price, against what charges, and how that will be delivered. So this is about the digital trust that I have in my mind.